Her son locked her in the basement, then handed her bedroom to his glowing wife. Eleanor Monroe, mother, widow, and legal co-owner, didn't beg. They called it temporary. They called it progress. By the time they noticed, the deed had been frozen. Her lawyer had already filed. She'd once given him life, a home, and her name on the mortgage. Now she was taking back every room he thought she'd surrendered. The first thing Eleanor noticed was the smell: damp concrete and dust, a scent that clung to her flannel pajama sleeves no matter how often she washed them. The second thing was the silence, not the peaceful kind, but the cold, echoing silence of a woman buried beneath her own roof. The headboard she'd shared with Harold for 42 years was the first to go. Jake had said it wouldn't fit down the stairs, then the dresser, then her nightstand, which Trisha had decided would be cuter in the baby's new nursery upstairs. Eleanor's belongings were packed into cardboard boxes marked "Basement Mom's Stuff" in rushed Sharpie. Now she lay on a twin mattress directly on the cement, wrapped in a blanket older than her son's marriage. Water spots spidered across the basement ceiling, and the exposed pipes rattled every time someone flushed upstairs. Jake stood in the doorway the day she was moved. "It's temporary," he'd said, arms crossed like a school principal. "You'll adjust. You're lucky to still be here." Trisha didn't say anything to Eleanor. She just hummed as she strolled into the master bedroom and fluffed the new ivory pillows she'd bought for her sanctuary. Lavender-scented candles flickered from the window ledge, and Eleanor had seen a welcome sign leaning against the bed. Her bed. Eleanor had watched it all unfold around her. She hadn't said a word, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't argued. She just stood there, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line that never broke, her expression unreadable. The real insult wasn't in the cardboard boxes stacked against the walls, or even in the way they had dragged her old mattress out like it was a piece of trash. The true sting was in the way they moved through the house, around her, without once acknowledging her presence. Like she was already invisible, like she had already ceased to exist. A ghost haunting a home she still technically lived in. Days later, after the dust had settled and they'd returned to acting like nothing was wrong, Eleanor found herself trying to survive the creeping cold. She pushed the heavy old dresser aside to reach the outlet and plug in the space heater. But as the dresser scraped across the floorboards, something else revealed itself. Black mold, curling and spreading behind the plaster like dark veins, like a silent warning written into the walls. She ran her fingers along it, feeling the damp rot crumble against her skin, tiny flakes of paint and decay sticking to her fingertips like reminders of what was festering underneath. The heater was missing. Her phone charger was gone too. She climbed the stairs, each step slow and deliberate, until she found Jake in the living room. "Where's the heater?" she asked, her voice calm, almost detached. Jake barely looked up. "Trisha took it," he muttered, like it was nothing. The outlet sparked. "It's not safe down there." His words were rehearsed, dismissive. Eleanor fixed her gaze on him. "And my phone?" she asked. This time Jake only shrugged. "You barely use it anyway." She stood there for a moment longer, letting the weight of the silence fill the space between them. Then she turned and walked back downstairs without another word. There was no point in arguing. Not yet. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy, it was calculation. It was the kind of quiet that gathers strength while others mistake it for weakness. That night, once the house had fallen into its usual heavy silence and they had gone to bed, Eleanor crouched down next to the floor vent. She leaned in, listening as their voices floated down from above. Trisha's voice was high-pitched, smug, dripping with fake cheerfulness. "She's just dead weight," Trisha laughed. "I mean, it's not like she's helping with anything. She's just there, lurking in the background like some leftover nobody knows what to do with." On the other end of the call, her friend burst into laughter. "Why don't you just ship her off to one of those cute little retirement villages? You know, like in Florida or something, they've got pools and shuffleboard. She'd fit right in." Trisha giggled sharply. "Oh, believe me," she replied, her voice dripping with malice. "We're working on it." Eleanor froze, one of Jake's shirts half folded in her hands. Jake stepped into the kitchen just then and saw her. "Mom!" His tone sliced the air. "Were you eavesdropping?" She blinked. "I was doing your laundry." "That doesn't mean you get to spy on private conversations," he snapped. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The look she gave him said everything. More patience than he deserved. More composure than he earned. Later that night, in the hollow chill of the basement, Eleanor unzipped an old floral pouch from her sewing kit. Inside it, wrapped in a grocery receipt from 2003, was a USB stick she hadn't touched in years. She plugged it into her laptop. It blinked red once, twice, then loaded. The folder still sat there waiting, Monroe Assets. She clicked it open, updated the password, and began adding fresh files. A photo of the mold behind the dresser. A snapshot of the water stains under her mattress. A voice memo she recorded immediately after Trisha's call, while the memory was fresh and raw. Trisha called me dead weight, said she was working on getting rid of me. She dated the file, titled it Incident 1. The next morning, she opened her yellowing address book and flipped to the H's. Carolyn Hoy, her attorney back when Harold was alive. Sharp, ethical, and as precise with words as a surgeon with a scalpel. Eleanor dialed the number with a steadiness that surprised her. Hoyt and Finnegan Law, came the crisp voice on the line. This is Eleanor Monroe, she said, her voice level. I need to confirm something. My son and his wife moved me to the basement. They've been making decisions like they own everything. Do I still have equity in the house? There was a pause, fingers typing. Carolyn's voice returned, cool and factual. You never signed away your share, Eleanor. Your late husband's estate left you with 40%. That's still intact unless formally transferred. Did you sign anything I don't know about? No, Eleanor said, the corners of her lips twitching upward. I haven't signed away a damn thing. Silence. Then Caroline exhaled, a faint smile in her tone. Then legally you're still part owner, and if they're treating you like a tenant, we have options. Eleanor ended the call and stared at the ceiling for a long while. 40%. Not a number, not a fraction. It was a crack in the concrete they had poured over her. That night, while Jake and Trisha clinked wine glasses upstairs over their new marble kitchen island, bought with a loan Eleanor had co-signed years ago, she opened her laptop again. One more click, her bank login. The screen blinked, then opened, still linked, mortgage account active, refinanced under Jake's name but co-signed by Eleanor Monroe. Her name's still there, sitting like a quiet witness in the upper right corner of the dashboard. She scrolled through the payment history, the loan details, the disbursements. They thought she'd forgotten how the system worked. They thought wrong. She closed the laptop slowly, then looked over at the photo of her and Harold taped to the furnace, his arm around her, paint splattered on both their shirts. Still ours, she whispered. From the edge of the basement stairs, Eleanor could see the ladder propped against the nursery doorframe. A sunbeam caught the edge of the roller brush as Jake dragged cream paint across the far wall. Underneath it, Harold's mural, a watercolor forest he'd painted by hand the year Jake was born, was slowly disappearing under commercial beige. She didn't say a word, didn't gasp, just watched, silent as a stone at the bottom of a pond. By noon, she was out front watering the dry shrubs when their neighbor, Linda, from across the cul-de-sac, paused mid-stride on her power walk. I saw Jake at the bank last week, Linda said casually, sipping from her sports bottle. Said he was pushing a refinance through, something about new equity. Eleanor blinked. Oh, strange with rates this high. But he said the bank was moving fast thanks to an old cosigner. Linda chuckled. Anyway, take care. As she disappeared down the sidewalk, Eleanor's breath slowed, heavy, deliberate. The mortgage dashboard from the night before spun in her head. The cosigner, her name, her leverage. She returned to the basement, the old pipes groaning above her like discontented spirits. Eleanor logged back into the mortgage portal. Every transaction, every approval date, it was all there. Jake had used the dormant co-signature on the original house loan to qualify for the refinance without asking, without informing. Her name had lifted their interest rate, but no one had mentioned that when they moved her beneath the foundation like some ghost of the property. She printed the mortgage summary and circled every document bearing her name, slid them into a manila folder labeled Retain. By evening, her laptop buzzed as a message popped up from Carolyn Hoy. Eleanor, you're within rights to begin a claim of misuse. Start compiling proof of displacement and financial exclusion. Trust me, you're not just a guest. You're a co-owner with standing. The next day, the yard bustled with pastel streamers and folding chairs. Trisha was throwing herself a backyard baby shower. Eleanor hadn't been invited. Not that she wanted to watch decorative cupcakes shaped like diapers or listen to women laugh about how they'd modernized the nursery. She stayed in the basement, beneath their laughter, like a root under cracked concrete. but she could still hear every word through the vent above the laundry chute. "She's like a little basement rat," Trisha giggled. "I swear she scurries around when she thinks no one's watching. At least rats earn their keep." Eleanor lifted her phone and pressed record. "Repeat that again," she whispered to herself. "Louder next time." That night, she sat at her makeshift desk, really a folding card table once used for jigsaw puzzles, and opened a blank document. At the top, in bold, "Notice of intent to partition real property." Her hands moved slowly, but her mind raced like a freight train. Every insult, every excluded meal, every time her bedroom light was ripped from her ceiling one bulb at a time. She filled in the address, her 40% stake. She outlined the timeline of her displacement, the illegal use of her co-signature, the verbal mistreatment. She added the words, "Property is not jointly managed in good faith. Request formal division or buyout." Before she could hit save, she heard the basement door creak open behind her. Jake stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, his voice soaked in disdain. "You'll need to start looking into senior facilities by winter," he said. "This setup isn't working anymore." Eleanor didn't even turn to face him. She clicked save, closed the file, and said one word, "Noted." Eleanor moved like a woman assembling armor, slow, quiet, deliberate. In the hum of the basement, lit only by a single bulb swinging slightly from its cord, she scrolled through her bank portal. The joint account she once opened with Harold now sat dormant, barely touched in years. But her name was still on it. Her rights hadn't expired just because the bedroom upstairs now held silk curtains and ultrasound photos. She began transferring in segments, never more than what would raise a flag, $2,500, then $3,000. Over 2 weeks, she moved nearly the entire amount into a newly established trust titled EM Living Holdings, sole beneficiary Eleanor Monroe. That night she called Carolyn. Her voice was steady, clipped like the edge of paper. "I need a title status check. I want to know what parts of this house are still legally mine." 2 days later, the reply came back, "Unencumbered 40%. You're clean on record." It felt like breath after weeks underwater, but her lungs barely filled before Jake made his next move. On a Thursday morning, Eleanor climbed the basement stairs to get tea and found the door locked. Not jammed, not stuck. Locked. She knocked once, then twice. Silence. She returned to her corner, set her kettle on the hot plate, and wrote one word on a notepad: retaliation. The next morning, a delivery arrived. Not groceries, a deadbolt and keypad lock she'd ordered online. While Jake was at work and Trisha out getting a prenatal massage, Eleanor installed it at the top of the basement stairs, her side. When Jake returned, he discovered the barrier, pounded once. She didn't answer. He yelled through the wood, "What the hell is this?" "Boundaries," she replied. She didn't hear from him for 3 days. In that silence, she ordered a discreet Wi-Fi security camera. She mounted it near the water heater, its lens angled upward toward the only entrance and exit. Every motion, every word, every shadow, footage auto-synced to her Dropbox account, labeled folders, access denied, audio evidence, emotional distress. Each file had a timestamp. She uploaded a new clip that night. Trisha stomping past the basement door, yelling, "I'm not raising a baby above a squatter." The insult didn't pierce like the others. Not this time, because this time Eleanor was gathering ammunition, not bruises. The next step was more personal. She called her cousin, Dana. Dana, a nurse with blunt hands and a sharper mouth, didn't hesitate. "I'll be your proxy," she said. "Medical, legal, emotional, all of it, even if they fight it." Dana laughed. "Let them try." Eleanor submitted the healthcare directive through Carolyn. Her power of attorney was now bulletproof. As the basement hummed with quiet plotting, Eleanor taped something new to the side of the furnace, an old photo. She and Harold, seated on the edge of their bed upstairs. He was barefoot. She was laughing into a pillow. The kind of photo that made time fold. She stared at it for a long moment, then stepped back. "I remember where I belong," she whispered. At midnight, her phone pinged. It was an email from Carolyn with a subject line that snapped like a trap closing, "Draft quiet title filing ready for review." The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked into the slats of Eleanor's basement mailbox like a secret waiting to be revealed. Heavy cream stock, gold foil seal from the county clerk's office. The quiet title was no longer a draft. It was a fact. She opened it with the same care she once gave to Christmas ornaments. Inside, official recognition of her as co-owner of record. Eleanor Monroe, 40% legal owner, uncontested. No longer just the woman in the basement. She sat down slowly on the edge of her mattress, still bare, still directly on the cold cement, and let the weight of it settle into her bones. Not joy, not vengeance. Leverage. That afternoon, she called the mortgage company. Calm voice, clear identity. "Yes," she said, "Eleanor Monroe. I'm on file as a co-owner of the property at 1417 Brookage. I'm formally revoking authorization for any new financial activity unless my signature is present. No refinances, no second mortgage, no lien extensions." The pause on the other end was long. Then, "Understood, Miss Monroe. Your restriction has been noted and flagged for all pending transactions." 3 hours later, the storm arrived. Jake banged on the basement door hard. "You went behind my back," he shouted. "They froze the loan. We can't finish the damn roof. Mom!" Eleanor rose without hurry, opened the door, but only enough to show her face. "I didn't go behind your back," she said evenly. "I stayed right here while you built over me." He clenched his jaw so tight his temple twitched. "You don't even need the upstairs. You don't use it." "Neither does a painting when it's stored in a vault," she replied, "but it's still worth something." The door closed softly. That night, Eleanor printed and mailed a formal letter drafted by Carolyn. It was both a declaration and an ultimatum, a partition demand. The home must be sold or bought out, her equity liquidated or honored. Jake had 30 days to respond. The tantrum came from upstairs 2 days later. Trisha's voice was high, panicked, sharp. "She's trying to ruin us. This was supposed to be our forever home, Jake." Eleanor sat in her corner, writing in a lined journal with a fountain pen. The ink feathered slightly on the cheap paper. She paused, then wrote slowly. "They forgot I was still on the deed." Later that evening, as the air cooled and the pipes moaned like old bones, Trisha burst into the basement unannounced, hair wild, mascara streaked. She held Eleanor's letter in one trembling hand. "You are destroying your son's life," she spat. Eleanor stood slowly, looked at the younger woman head-on. "You never invited me upstairs," she said, voice steady. "So I stayed below and built a case." Trisha stormed out, nearly slipping on the last step. The next morning, Jake tried to make good on a threat. Eleanor heard him before she saw him, boots stomping across floorboards. She flipped the basement cam into live view. Jake stood over her hope chest, lifting it, grunting. By the time she reached the top step, there was a knock at the front door. 2 officers stood there, summoned by a noise complaint, probably Jake trying to make her look disruptive. Instead, he was the one taken aback when she handed one officer a copy of her quiet title judgment and notarized equity verification. "I'm not trespassing," she said calmly. "I'm not a tenant. I'm an owner." The officer glanced at the paper, then up at Jake. "Sir, we recommend you don't touch any of her property until this is settled in court." Jake's face flushed, but he said nothing. Later that evening, Carolyn called. "You did it," she said. "You're back in control." "But Eleanor, if you want full ownership—" A pause, the legal version of a held breath. "We escalate." Eleanor crawled on her elbows, dragging her knees through decades of dust beneath the basement's low joists. The air was dry but sharp, like it hadn't moved in years. Cobwebs kissed her cheeks, and something sharp grazed her shin. She didn't flinch. In the back corner, wedged beside an old insulation bundle and a box marked Xmas 94, she found it. A rusted flathead screwdriver, its wooden handle cracked but familiar. She remembered it. Remembered the day it slipped from her apron pocket while installing baseboards in the guest room. She'd been 7 months pregnant with Jake. It wasn't just a tool, it was proof. She pulled the box toward her. Inside, wrapped in yellowing newspaper and the faint scent of cedar, were photos. Hundreds of them. Her in paint-smeared overalls. Her late husband, Martin, hammering trim while Eleanor balanced a level. And one of her climbing a ladder with a brush in her hand, belly curved and proud, painting what would become Jake's nursery. She pressed that one to her chest and smiled. Later that night, under the weak hum of the basement's utility bulb, she scanned each photo into a Dropbox folder. Monroe Establishment, 1989. Then she emailed the entire set to Carolyn with a note. Historical equity. Literal sweat. The next morning, Trisha fired back. Eleanor was reaching for the kettle on her hot plate when she heard a knock at the basement's back door. A stranger's voice called out, "Ma'am, I'm Officer Sanders. You've been served with a temporary protective order." Eleanor blinked, then laughed softly. The accusation, emotional distress, claimed malicious intent and psychological intimidation. The judge dismissed it in less than 4 minutes, the clerk said. Frivolous and retaliatory, dismissed without prejudice. Carolyn didn't waste a moment. Let's move. Full partition. Market valuation. We're not playing defense anymore. Eleanor agreed and filed. It was 2 nights later when the basement camera blinked off. No warning, no sound, just gone. She climbed the stairs and found the remains of the shattered cam at the base of the washing machine. Jake stood above it, holding a broom handle like a bat. The plastic shell of the lens was splintered, wires exposed. Your spying days are over, he said. Eleanor stared at him silent, then turned and walked back down the stairs without a word. The next morning, she filed a report for destruction of property, submitted the broken pieces in a Ziploc bag, attached a printout of the last footage, Jake's shadow crossing the basement threshold. That same day, Dana arrived. Eleanor opened the door and found her cousin with 2 duffel bags and a cot strapped across her back. Move aside, Dana said, grinning. I'm not letting you sleep through this alone. They set the cot next to Eleanor's mattress. That night they shared a space heater, 2 cups of chamomile, and the heavy kind of silence that comes before a storm. I didn't think it would come to this, Eleanor admitted. Dana shifted on her pillow. You don't have to just survive this, Elle. You can win. It wasn't the way she said it. It was the certainty in her voice, the absence of pity. Like Eleanor wasn't an old woman under siege, but a general preparing her final formation. By Sunday, the box of photos had become an exhibit file. The destruction of property report had become a supplemental claim. The narrative was no longer about inconvenience. It was about displacement. It was about legacy. Monday morning, the envelope came. County Court, Family Division, partition hearing date confirmed. Eleanor read the date, then read it again, and once more slower. She turned to Dana, who was brewing coffee with a camping press in the corner. We have a court date. Dana raised her mug like a toast. Then we have a win to plan. The tape measure hissed as the appraiser dragged it along the living room wall, its metallic snap echoing louder than necessary. Jake stood with his arms crossed, breathing hard through his nose, jaw twitching like a man being asked to disprove his own name. Eleanor sat quietly on the bench beneath the front window, a worn yellow legal pad resting on her lap. Every time Jake muttered about ungrateful old women or petty court drama, Eleanor noted the time, the words, the witness. The appraiser said nothing, but his pen paused longer each time. I'd appreciate it, Eleanor said softly, if you included any observations about cooperation in your report. The appraiser gave the slightest nod. That's standard protocol. When he asked to access the basement, Jake scoffed. She doesn't need that measured. That's not even finished square footage. Eleanor rose. It's 470 square feet of living space where I've been confined for the better part of a year. I assure you, it matters. Dana, who had taken the morning off from her nursing shift, stood at the top of the basement stairs with arms folded. We'll meet you down there, she said. Later, while Eleanor filed new photos into her Dropbox, a knock came at the locked basement door. It was Tricia. I brought tea, she called through the wood. Eleanor didn't open the door. Leave it on the steps. A pause. Then, Eleanor, can we talk? Just us? This whole court thing is getting out of hand. Eleanor stepped closer but didn't unlock the door. You want private resolution now? Her voice didn't rise, but it landed sharp. Where was that privacy when you painted over my husband's mural? I was just trying to make a home. You made a brand, Eleanor said, cutting her off. Not a home. The footsteps faded. That night, Dana returned from work with a strange expression. What? Eleanor asked. Dana set her bag down and pulled out her phone. Jake cornered me in the parking lot. Eleanor stiffened. He asked if I could help de-escalate things with you. Said maybe you'd listen to me more than your lawyer. Then he slipped this in my coat pocket. She handed over a folded check. $5,000. Eleanor didn't blink. You didn't cash it? Dana rolled her eyes. I'm insulted he thought I could be bought for so little. The next day, Carolyn submitted a formal motion for harassment and attempted witness tampering. Dana's phone recording, clear, time-stamped, and damning, was attached as Exhibit A. We're done being polite, Carolyn said. Eleanor nodded. File a cease and desist too. No more kitchen table negotiations. That same afternoon, Tricia reemerged in her preferred theater, social media. Eleanor had created a burner Facebook account weeks earlier. That's how she saw it. A glossy post of Tricia sipping a latte in front of a generic farmhouse backdrop captioned, Sometimes you have to prune the dead branches to let your tree grow. Guess who's getting the boot soon? Beneath it, a laughing emoji parade, a few hearts. One comment, finally. Eleanor clicked archive, screenshot, timestamp evidence. She didn't comment, she didn't react. She just saved it in the folder labeled defamation pending. Then she opened a new folder, titled it Appraisal to Action. The walls may have belonged to them in theory, but the land, the memories, the legal documents, and soon the outcome were all shifting. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a pen. Boundaries had been crossed. Now they were being redrawn. Eleanor tapped the dim glow of her phone screen from her basement cot, thumb steady despite the tension in her jaw. A ping had come from her anonymous Facebook account. The name on the post, Trisha Monroe. The caption was loud, even in silence. Boundaries are beautiful. Some people don't realize when it's time to exit gracefully. Beneath it, a filtered photo of Trisha standing in the newly painted nursery. Her hand curved dramatically over her baby bump. A smug half-smile plastered across her face, but it wasn't the image that cut. It was the tags, #NotYourHome, #shock, #unwanted roommate, #chabooted and bitter. Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She opened her Dropbox and created a new folder. Defamation public. Screenshot, timestamp, archive, repeat. The comments came fast, laced with venom and laughter from Trisha's curated circle of digital sycophants. Good for you. Dead weight doesn't belong in a nursery. Tell her to try AIB&B. One particularly cruel post read, "She's probably down there building a nest in the insulation." That one Eleanor saved twice. The next morning, she emailed every file to Carolyn with a subject line that read, "Adding weight to the emotional distress argument." Within hours, Caroline replied, "Noted, I'm attaching a supplemental affidavit. Also, she's just subpoenaed." Eleanor leaned back, letting the words sit. Upstairs, she could hear the blender, a high-pitched whine that buzzed into her bones. She imagined Trisha sipping another smug smoothie, unaware of the storm she'd stirred. But the real noise came later. Jake knocked at the basement door. No venom this time, just breathy urgency. "Mom," he said, voice cracking, "can we talk?" She didn't open it. "There's a way to end this quietly," he continued. We could give you something, I mean like a payout, no lawyers, no court, just stop the motion." A pause. "I know you don't want this fight anymore." Eleanor stared at the door, then at her phone. Another screenshot. This one of his text from earlier. "Let's settle. Cash. Off record. What will it take to make you disappear?" She said nothing, just typed one word to Carolyn. Delivered. Later that night, while Eleanor stirred her chamomile tea over her basement hot plate, Dana spread a stack of printed papers across the fold-out table. "I started something," she said, pushing a binder toward Eleanor. The cover read, "Partition Playbook, a guide for women in their own homes." Inside were outlines, checklists, sample affidavits, and screenshots of Trisha's post under a section titled Public Hostility Evidence. "Too many women have no idea what to do when they're shoved out of their own lives," Dana said. "But you're the blueprint." Eleanor ran her hand across the cover. "It's more than survival now." Dana nodded. "It's precedent." That night, Eleanor climbed into bed. Not the creaking cot of emotional erosion, but the sturdy mattress of reclaiming. She cracked open the binder, flipping through Dana's meticulous diagrams. One page caught her eye. Day 1 of resistance. Document. Day 2. Decide. Day 3. Design your endgame. Eleanor circled all 3. She wasn't just reading it. She was living it. Upstairs, the nursery light flicked on. It cast faint shadows between the floorboards above her, like a stage light missing its cue. But the spotlight was shifting, and Eleanor was no longer beneath it. She was holding the switch. Her phone buzzed. "Carolyn, we have enough. If the judge sides with us, we request eviction." Eleanor smiled. The courtroom's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Cold, institutional, impartial. Eleanor sat at the plaintiff's table, hands steady, dressed in navy wool and quiet certainty. Her purse rested at her feet, and inside it, a folded photograph worn soft at the creases. Her husband standing beside her 30 years ago, both of them smiling with fresh paint on their arms and drywall dust in their hair. Their house, their sweat, their start. Jake was slouched at the defense table, blazer wrinkled, jaw tight. Trisha sat next to him in a soft pink blouse that screamed, "Harmless." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, theatrically sniffling. Her makeup was flawless. Her tears were not. The judge, a sharp-featured woman in her early 60s, leaned over the file folder in front of her. "We'll begin with the petitioner," she said. Carolyn rose. "Your Honor, Miss Eleanor Monroe is not just a displaced senior. She is a legal co-owner, emotionally isolated, financially misled, and physically relegated to unsafe quarters by the defendants, her son and his wife." Eleanor stood, her voice calm but clear, held the kind of power that came from decades of biting her tongue. "I have documented records from the past 18 months, photos of mold growth, journaled comments, financial statements, co-ownership documentation from the original deed. I've also submitted screenshots of defamation and a timeline of denied access to utilities and common living space." She opened a folder. Inside were images printed in full color, Trisha's online insults, the photo of the crib placed over her late husband's mural, and dated screenshots from her bank portal. "They didn't just push me downstairs," Eleanor said. "They rewrote the upstairs like I never existed." Trisha sobbed louder. "Mrs. Monroe," the judge said, eyebrow raised, "you'll have your turn." Trisha wiped a tear and nodded demurely. Carolyn turned to the bench. "Additionally, the basement was never designated as livable space in the original house plans. It lacks full HVAC access, and our submitted footage confirms environmental safety issues. My client's medical records show sinus inflammation, likely caused by mold exposure." Jake finally spoke up. "My mother didn't have to stay down there. She chose to be difficult. She wouldn't adapt." "She wasn't difficult," Dana said, standing from the witness pew. "She was discarded. I moved in with her for 2 weeks. There were nights she shivered because they'd removed the heater. Nights she overheard Trisha laughing upstairs, calling her the basement rat." The courtroom quieted. Caroline placed one final packet in front of the judge. "And this is a full financial tracing report, Mr. Monroe used Eleanor's former co-signature to refinance the home without disclosure or consent. These funds supported upper-floor renovations and private nursery upgrades. Miss Monroe never benefited from any portion of that loan." Jake opened his mouth, shut it again. Trisha turned toward him, hissing, "You said it wouldn't show up." "Miss Monroe," the judge interrupted, "do you have anything else to add before we adjourn?" Eleanor took a breath, then slowly pulled the folded photo from her purse and held it up. "We built that house, my husband and I, not just physically, with intentions, with trust. That trust wasn't inherited, it was earned, and what wasn't earned was taken." She sat down. The judge's gavel tapped once. "We are adjourned until ruling. Court will reconvene in 72 hours. As the courtroom emptied, Eleanor remained seated, alone now. The buzz of movement faded around her. She unfolded the photo and placed it on the bench beside her like a quiet companion. "We built it," she whispered. "I'm not giving it away." She gently tucked the photo back into her purse. Her phone vibrated a moment later. A message from Carolyn lit the screen. "Judge has filed an interim ruling. You may now file for full buyout at current market value." The next morning, the appraiser stepped out of the master bedroom, clipboard in hand, and gave a tight nod. "Full market value, $684,000, he said. "That includes depreciation, upgrades, and the mold remediation cost. Your 40% stake puts your share at $273,600. Jake's face drained of color, like someone had pulled the plug on his pride. Trisha, standing stiff at the top of the staircase, clutched her phone like it might somehow change the numbers. Eleanor just nodded. "Understood," she said quietly. Her voice held the kind of calm that only comes after weathering years of erasure. Later that afternoon, she sat across from Carolyn at the law office, a crisp folder between them. "We make the offer," Carolyn said. "Full acquisition, clean title transfer, cash buyout." Eleanor placed a check on the table, an advance drawn from her retirement trust. "I want the house. I'll cover the rest within 30 days. Structured disbursement. Everything through the LLC." That evening, the formal offer was delivered by courier, sealed, notarized, and stamped with the court's interim order. The next morning, the door slammed. "You want to buy us out?" Jake shouted, stomping into the basement. "This is my home. I have a family now." Eleanor stood, brushing plaster dust off her sweater from the unfinished wall she'd leaned against. "You used me to get this house. You forgot I was still on the deed." Trisha appeared behind Jake, mascara smudged like war paint. "You're evil, Eleanor. We gave you a place to live, and this is how you thank us. You gave me mold, Eleanor replied, and you took my room. I'm returning the favor with paperwork. Jake pointed a trembling finger. You don't even want to live here. You just want to ruin us. Carolyn stepped into the doorway, cool as glass. You have 30 days. Accept the offer or vacate. If not, we proceed to forced sale and eviction. Don't talk to me like I'm some squatter, Jake barked. You're a partial owner at best, Carolyn said, but your debts aren't partial. Your liabilities are full. For the next week, silence lingered in the house like smoke. Eleanor moved through it without apology. She made tea on the hot plate, cataloged receipts, and finalized disbursement transfers from her Roth IRA. Dana helped box Trisha's boutique baby items. They used this house like a showroom, Dana muttered, folding a tulle bassinet canopy, and you were just the curtain they wanted to keep closed. On the 29th day, a locksmith arrived. Eleanor stood at the front door in a soft gray cardigan, arms folded, deed folder in hand. Full title? The man asked. She nodded. Transferred by court order this morning. He replaced every lock, front, back, basement, garage. Eleanor watched each bolt fall into place like punctuation at the end of a sentence she'd been writing since the night she was shoved downstairs. At 10:47 p.m., there was a thunderous knock. Eleanor didn't flinch. Open the damn door! Jake's voice cracked through the night. She opened the deadbolt cover but didn't unlock it. Through the frosted glass, she could see his silhouette, fists clenched, shoulders heaving. You'll die alone, he shouted. Eleanor tilted her head. Better than living buried. There was a pause, a breath. Then footsteps retreated into the dark. The last echo of Jake's boots faded down the driveway. A soft hush settled over the house like it was exhaling after years of holding its breath. Eleanor stood at the foot of the stairs, hand grazing the rail. Her fingers trembled, not from age, but memory. The night she'd been led down those steps, she was told it was just for now. Now had lasted 14 months and 6 days, but today she rose. Step by step, the old wood creaked beneath her, familiar yet different. At the top landing, she paused. A light breeze drifted through an open window. Somewhere a wind chime rang. Her bedroom door stood slightly ajar. She nudged it open and stepped inside. The crib was gone. The walls, once painted coral and covered in vinyl decals of clouds, were stripped bare. A faint outline of where her dresser had once stood clung like a ghost on the wall. The smell of lavender air freshener still lingered, clashing with the faint scent of dust. Eleanor moved slowly, deliberately. She opened the window wider. Sunlight spilled onto the hardwood floor in broad golden ribbons. Her hand trailed the wall as she crossed the room. She placed a simple armchair, floral cushion, curved oak arms, by the window, in the very spot she used to sit with a young Jake curled into her lap, his head heavy on her chest as she read aloud, Where the Wild Things Are, always his favorite. That chair had waited in the attic for 20 years. Today it reclaimed its place. Downstairs, Dana was already boxing up what remained in the basement. Spare crib parts, peeling motivational posters, plastic storage tubs filled with clothes still bearing store tags. Trisha never needed these, Dana said, sealing one of the boxes with a flourish of tape. She just wanted to be seen owning them. They spent the afternoon cleaning together, Dana on her knees, scrubbing corners with a toothbrush, Eleanor humming while she painted the concrete walls a gentle, welcoming white. With every stroke, she whispered to herself, someone kind might need this space someday. Let them find it clean. By sunset, the basement felt like a different place, no longer a punishment, but a possibility. The next morning, Eleanor's landline rang. She didn't recognize the number. Mrs. Monroe? A bright voice asked. This is Naomi with Channel 6. We saw the court record and wanted to do a feature. Elder co-owner reclaims home. Would you be willing to talk? Eleanor hesitated. Only if you don't make me into a sob story, she said. This wasn't about pity. It was about property. An hour later, the station emailed a draft of the segment. A slow pan of the house exterior, the courtroom sketch, a closing shot of Eleanor painting the basement beside Dana. They aired it that night. By the next morning, her mailbox was full, real and digital. Handwritten notes arrived from Montana, Ohio, Arizona. Women scribbled in cursive and block print. You gave me language. You reminded me I'm not invisible. I'm next. Eleanor sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, reading each letter out loud to Dana, whose eyes filled with quiet, hot tears. One envelope stood out, pale yellow. No return address. Inside was a card with just one sentence: "You didn't just win, you taught us how." Eleanor framed it and placed it on her bedroom dresser, right where her old family photo used to sit. For the first time in years, she slept upstairs with no fear of footsteps above her. The next morning, she opened her email to find a message with the subject line, "Will you help us design a guidebook?" It was from the founder of a national housing rights nonprofit. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing with cautious curiosity. "Well now," she said, "that's a start." The first draft came back covered in red notes, not from an editor but from Eleanor herself. "This sentence is vague." She circled in firm pen over a paragraph on asset tracing. "Be precise. Women reading this won't have time for soft language." She wasn't writing a memoir. She was building a weapon, a shield, a tool belt, a way out. Across the dining room table sat Naomi Chang, founder of the Women's Housing Justice Network. She had reached out the week after Eleanor's story aired. What began as a conversation had become a collaboration. "The Basement Owner's Handbook," Naomi read aloud. "It's punchy. It's clear." Eleanor sat down her tea and adjusted her glasses. "It's not just for women in basements. It's for anyone who's ever been told they don't count because someone else controls the thermostat." Dana, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside a half-packed box of flyers, looked up. "And the flow chart. I finished it last night," she said, handing over a laminated printout. At the center, in bold orange font, "Displaced doesn't mean powerless." From it branched a clean, color-coded trail: title recovery, deed verification, restraining orders, partition filing. At the bottom, a quiet quote: "They buried you. You grew roots." They scheduled the launch for a Saturday morning in mid-April at the county library Eleanor used to take Jake to for story hour. That morning she dressed with reverence: navy blazer, cream blouse, pearl studs. Her wedding band still shone faintly beneath the light as she tucked her hair behind her ears. When she walked into the multi-purpose room, it was already filling. Rows of folding chairs occupied by faces of every age and color. The scent of brewed coffee mingled with library paper and spring air from the open windows. Dana stood by a poster board with a photo of Eleanor's house taped at the top. Across it read, "From basement to blueprint. One woman's legal guide to staying home." Eleanor approached the podium. Her palms rested on the edge of the wood, steady. She scanned the room, not a sound. Then she spoke. "I wasn't thrown away," she said, voice firm, warm. "I was underestimated. There was no applause at first, only silence, the thick kind, the kind that holds shared grief and quiet understanding. Then someone sniffled, then clapped. One by one, hands rose in ovation. After the speech, women lined up not for books, but for moments. A nod, a thank you. One leaned in with shaking fingers and whispered, "That was my story too, except I haven't gotten out yet." Eleanor didn't hesitate. She hugged her. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "Good luck." She said, "Call this number tomorrow. Naomi will answer." By the end of the day, 78 handbooks had been distributed. 50 more were already on back order. Dana took a group photo. Eleanor stood in the center, surrounded but not overshadowed. Back home, the sun was beginning to set when Caroline's car pulled into the driveway. She walked up the front steps with a manila envelope in hand. "I thought I'd stop by in person," she said. "You always did know how to make paper feel like a moment," Eleanor replied. Caroline handed over the envelope, her expression unreadable, but her eyes shimmered. "These are for your legacy," she said softly. Eleanor opened the flap. Inside, documents bearing her name, an updated will, a land trust application, and a proposal for a foundation grant named in her honor. She looked up. "I wasn't planning to be a name." "No," Carolyn said. "But you made one mean something." Eleanor gently laid the papers across the table, fingers grazing the embossed header. Her gaze flicked to Dana, who was watching from the hallway. "Let's talk about what happens to the house when I'm gone," she said. The signature was inked in navy blue, slow and deliberate. Carolyn slid the final page of the will back across the table, her manicured nails tapping once against the polished wood. "It's official," she said, voice even. "You've secured every corner of the legacy. It's yours to give." Eleanor nodded, exhaling through her nose. "It always was. They just forgot." The house now had a fate more generous than its most recent residents deserved. Upon her passing, it would transfer to the Ruth Haven Shelter for Elder Women, a transitional housing organization Eleanor had quietly toured weeks earlier. Hardwood floors, quiet dignity. They called their tenants guests, and Eleanor remembered how rare that word had felt lately. Carolyn opened her folder. You want to read the clause again? I know what it says. Still, she recited it aloud, each word etched with quiet steel. No inheritance, tangible or fiduciary, shall pass to any person who by act or omission displaces or silences an elder under their care. It would hold. It had precedent, and it carried weight. Eleanor stood, walked to the mantel, and retrieved the small iron key that once opened the fireproof safe in the basement. She slid it into a tiny box labeled car and handed it over to her cousin with a smile. I figured you'd drive it better than I did, she said. Dana blinked back something wet. I'll only use it for good, and groceries, and joy rides. Take it somewhere where people know how to signal. Laughter softened the air between them. Later, Eleanor brought down a sealed carton from her closet. Inside were notebooks, leather-bound, ribbon-marked, the spines worn with years, journals dating back decades. Inside, reflections, receipts, clippings, court transcripts, and letters, some never sent, some never finished. These go to the nonprofit, she said, for training or shredding, but they're yours now. She laid them gently beside the guidebooks Dana had helped design, history folding into blueprints. The doorbell rang late that afternoon. On the mat, a plain manila envelope with Jake's blocky handwriting scrolled across the front. Mom. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. The wind pushed against her skirt, stirring the grass. The letter was unsealed. She didn't touch it. Carolyn, she called softly from the hallway. Would burning this violate any clause? Carolyn, seated with a cup of tea and today's paper, didn't even look up. Only your peace of mind. Eleanor let it lie. The wind could carry it if it wanted. The light shifted as the day wore on. Outside, a group of kids on mismatched bikes cut lazy loops down the street. She watched them from the window of her bedroom, her room, where she had once nursed Jake through chickenpox and read him the Velveteen Rabbit under a quilt she'd sewn herself. She smiled, not with sadness, but with remembering. The final room of the house felt less like a destination and more like an arrival. Everything that mattered was already here. The wall she painted cream again last week, the sun patch on the carpet near the windowsill, the empty rocking chair beside the photo of her late husband. In her planner, she turned to the last clean page. She wrote in block letters, "Final room full circle." Then beneath it, almost like a whisper in ink, "Prepare music for the Will video." The red light blinked steadily on the camcorder. Eleanor sat straight, her shoulders soft but tall, wearing the navy blouse her husband once called victory blue. A single strand of pearls circled her throat like punctuation. "If you're seeing this," she began, voice warm and even, "it means my story reached the next room, and I hope you're sitting somewhere you chose." She paused, not for breath, just space. "To those who believed in me, thank you. You knew a basement wasn't the end of a chapter. It was the part where the foundation holds." A soft smile crept across her face. "To those who buried me, legally or emotionally, I hope you learn what it means to carry a house without kindness. I hope it's heavy." She reached for a file beside her and held it up to the lens, labeled Next Woman folder. Inside were copies of property protections, a printed guidebook, hotline numbers, and handwritten notes in Eleanor's cursive. "For the next woman who sleeps here, this is yours now. May you never need it. But if you do, start here." After she clicked the record button again, ending the take, Dana walked in and kissed her cheek without a word. Eleanor handed over the SD card like a baton. "Put it with the deed file." She moved through the house like it remembered her. In the garage, she opened the small cedar chest her husband once kept locked. Inside were chisels, hammers, tape measures, each worn but clean. She bundled them neatly in canvas and dropped them off at the county youth workshop the next morning. "From someone who knew the value of a good grip," she said. The coordinator didn't ask for her name. They just nodded, reverent. Later, Eleanor stood on the porch. The wood still creaked in the same spot under her heel. She turned her face to the sun, steeped a mug of chamomile, and watched steam curl against the morning air. A goldfinch landed on the railing beside her, still for a moment, then gone. She reached for her small Bluetooth speaker, pressed play. Marvin Gaye's voice filled the quiet. "Ain't no mountain high enough." She didn't sing, just closed her eyes and let it wash over her. Let the lyrics settle in the grooves of her skin. The house was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet she'd endured. This was the kind that breathed. The front lawn had grown lush again. She watched a couple jog by, a stroller between them. The wife nodded toward Eleanor with a gentle smile. The husband followed her gaze, then lifted a hand in silent greeting. Eleanor returned the gesture, then whispered, "Peace looks better when it takes its time." She spent that afternoon organizing the will packet into a locked file drawer marked for Carolyn. Her wedding ring lay beside the file key, resting on an old silver spoon. The inscription inside the band read simply, "Let love build." As the sun slid down toward the horizon, Eleanor turned the porch light on. Not out of fear, but ritual. She wasn't waiting for anyone, but she'd leave the light just the same. Back inside, she lit a single candle on the kitchen table. The scent was something familiar, vanilla and pine. The blend her husband used to joke smelled like Christmas in a bakery. She sat in the soft silence, her palm resting on the grain of the table they'd once sanded together. And when the last light outside dimmed, Eleanor leaned back in her chair and murmured, "Ownership is not a room, it's a decision." The screen fades to black. Only her voice remains, echoing over a still image of the house. The conference room lights dimmed. A click echoed as the video began, and Eleanor's face lit the projector screen. Still serene, proud, her voice aged and unwavering, reached every corner of the shelter's boardroom with the poise of someone who had climbed out of silence. "If you're seeing this," she said, the same words she'd recorded on that porch morning, "then you're part of something bigger than a house. You're part of a rebuild." No one spoke as the room filled with her story. Basement shadows, courtrooms, fireproof safes, silver heels. One board member wiped her cheek, another clutched a pen, knuckles white. When the final words faded, "Ownership is not a room, it's a decision," Dana stood up, holding a pair of gold-plated scissors in her trembling hand. Outside, a small crowd gathered beneath a bright white banner fluttering above the porch of Eleanor's former home. Children tugged on their parents' coats, curious. Reporters raised cameras. Women with lived-in faces and sharp eyes stood shoulder to shoulder in quiet solidarity. The new plaque glinted in the sun. Monroe House, a safe step forward. The basement was never the end. It was the beginning. Dana, in a navy dress Eleanor once called her lawyer blue, cut the ribbon, clean. A cheer rippled through the gathering, but Dana didn't smile immediately. She looked up at the second-story window where Eleanor once watched the world pass and whispered, "We did it." Inside, former guest rooms had been transformed into temporary suites, lined with calming colors and framed affirmations. On one shelf in the common area sat a row of spiral-bound notebooks, Eleanor's journals, laminated and categorized, legal paths, survival notes, things I shouldn't have had to learn. A young woman in a hoodie picked one up and gasped softly. "She wrote this?" "Yes," said the staff member beside her. "She wrote all of it." Meanwhile, across town, a courier handed Jake a manila envelope. He opened it with a grunt, expecting a bill. Instead, it was a formal notice: disinheritance, full, irrevocable, final. Attached was a list of property dispositions with his name not even mentioned beneath the vehicle, home, or estate clauses. In Eleanor's cursive, near the bottom, "For those who lock doors against you, leave them keys to nothing." Jake slumped into the patio chair, holding the paper like it might change if he stared hard enough. Inside, Tricia had already packed a suitcase. "You used me to bury your mother," she muttered, voice sharp with blame. "Now she's the name on the damn plaque." "You're leaving?" he asked. She turned to the door. "You already lost the house. You don't get to lose me too." "I'm walking away." By nightfall, Monroe House glowed warm through its windows. A young mother tucked her son into bed on what had once been Eleanor's basement cot, now wrapped in fresh linens and dignity. In the upstairs reading nook, a teenage girl traced her finger along a note framed on the wall. "To the next woman, you are not less because they put you low. Foundations are always laid at the bottom. Eleanor Monroe." That night, Dana stood in the kitchen, Monroe House's kitchen, sipping tea from Eleanor's favorite mug, the one with the faded cardinal, the one that had survived the basement winter. She took out her phone and texted the board chat. She never wanted revenge. She wanted proof that silence wasn't the end. We gave her that. And at the front door, under porch light and stars, a final visitor placed flowers in the brass vase near the steps. A single folded note tucked beneath the bouquet read simply, "Thank you for teaching us that even a foundation crack can be a place where light gets in."